Hi, everyone, and welcome to Living Well with Dr. John, Adjustment Through the Lifespan. Today's topic is leaving the home post-injury. Two quick notes before we begin. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be available on the Reeve Foundation YouTube channel. Additionally, to turn on closed captioning, please click the CC button on the bottom of your Zoom screen. Before we begin, I'm going to share two webinar disclaimers. The first is, this is for educational purposes only. For psychological services, please contact your state psychological association for referral. The second disclaimer is, the questions, comments, and opinions expressed during this webinar may not express the views and beliefs of the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation. Now for some background on Dr. John. Dr. John Chang is a clinical psychologist and is board certified in rehabilitation psychology. He's a professor of psychology at East Stroudsburg University, as well as a consulting psychologist. Dr. Chang also has a private practice through Doctors on Demand. I'm now going to turn it over to Dr. John. Hi, Dr. John.
Hey, Kelly. Thank you for the intro. Hello, listeners. Good afternoon and good morning. Those of you that are on the West Coast, I am, again, so appreciative of you coming in and spending an hour of your time. Time is life, and so I appreciate you spending a little bit of your life with me. As I always do, and in every one of my beginning of every one of my podcasts, I want to thank Haley and Angela for guiding, cultivating, creating, and making sure this thing works on a monthly basis. I know I sound like a broken wheel, but I would never want to not have gratitude for the people who support me and some of my ideas and thoughts. And so again, Kaylee, thank you. And Angela, if you get a chance to see this, thank you once again for your guidance. So I'm going to start off with talking about a call I just got about an hour ago. So one of my clients' mother called and said, look, my son who is at a rehab, and he was there for sore, and the sore was healed, which is awesome, but they are planning to discharge him home. She herself, is in her 70s, multiple medical issues, and she has no way to help take care of him. He's on he has a lot of other medical, a lot higher of a level of quadriplegic than I am, and has more medical concerns. And so, almost in tears, she's asking, what should I do? And I'm going to say to you, I didn't have any suggestions for it when it comes to caregivers and getting home and support. That is one of the greatest frustrations about having to be a spinal cord injury, in the sense of no matter if you accept it, no matter if you're happy with it, no matter if you can overcome it, it's still an issue that you're relying on people for your care. And if the care is not as available, especially during this pandemic process, it becomes incredibly hard, incredibly difficult. So that's just a personal account of real life situation that's happening for many of us who have disability, that you hope you have all your ducks in a row to come home. And when you sit at home and you're looking to have a life beyond your house, and you want to transition out, in hopefully my conversation with you today, you have to have all your ducks in a row. And unfortunately, many of those times your ducks will not be in a row. And does that mean, do you have a backup? Do you have a backup situation that can make it work? So I'm going to start off with question 1 for you right now. Do you currently live at home, with your parents, or, some facet of that? So either with spinal cord injury or without. Those of you who are my, some of my professionals who are listening in, you still can answer this. Do you live at home? Maybe you go to college, but you still have your home base at home. Do you live there? Yes or no? In the meantime, while you answer that question, let's see, close that off. So do you live at home? And okay, we have about almost a 50-50 average of a 48 to 52. Okay, great. And my second question is, have you at least tried once independently to live away from home? Okay, have you tried to leave the nest and live independently? So I'm going to talk a little bit about what I remember when I was in rehab, and please, in a 30 years post, so we're looking at in the 1980s. And I remember being in rehab for a long time, and all I wanted was to go home. I mean, that was like every day. I just did not like being in the hospital. Don't get, the hospital was great, the people were great, but I just wanted to go home. And our poll says yes, 72% says yes. And so great. So many of you have tried living independently. So going home, it's like, okay, I was very fortunate. We had a 3-story home when I broke my neck, and I was like, oh boy, it's going to be a big issue. But it just happened that my parents was building a ranch at the time, where everything was on one floor. And this is the part where sometimes I'm like, there has to be a God that's watching everybody, watching over me, because how do you just happen to have your parents building a ranch as I'm breaking my neck? I mean, what are the odds that those things would come hand in hand? But I was very grateful and happy the fact that it did happen. I got home and everything was on one floor. Now, unfortunately, back in the old days, they had rugs. The rugs were hard to push. And so I found myself stuck in the kitchen with an linoleum where I can push for many hours until the electric chair came in. And again, back in those days, it took months until electric chair actually ever showed up. But I couldn't wait to get home. And the things that they talk about going home, and they probably taught me these things, but I'll tell you, I don't remember any of those things as I was in rehab, other than I hate being disabled, I hate being paralyzed, I just wanted to go home. And it's almost like you thought if you go home to where you used to be, that everything maybe will go back to normal. And the reality is that obviously it doesn't. If anything, when you do go home, that was a time where everything started to become real. That, wow, I no longer can do the things that I used to do in the environment that I grew up. It was a shocker. It was a huge shock of my reality and sanity. It was a huge reality that my friends weren't my friends anymore. Many of my friends no longer could be my friends because I no longer could do the things I used to do with them. So going home was one of the best things for me, but going home was almost one of the scariest things for me to realize, having new friends, finding another meaning in life, figuring out what to do. And so tell me in the chat, did you experience that as well, going home, that first, after your first rehab? And, the rehab, and tell me if this happened to you. When you're in a rehab for a long time with great people, most of the people there are in wheelchairs. Everybody knew what to do. Everybody accepted you. And so it was a nice little bubble that you existed. And then you go home and that bubble is no longer there. And that's where the adjustment really had to happen. Yeah, it was traumatic, as Thomas said. And it's funny, I had to go back to rehab after 3 months of being home to do bladder training. And going back to the hospital for a few more weeks to do bladder training was like the best time. I was like, it was nice to go back to the hospital and psychologically had to forget that, oh my God, the world exists and I don't belong in it for a while. And so going home was great. It scared the crap out of me. Going back into the hospital was even better. And it was almost like a vacation. I got to go back into the hospital, spend a few more weeks hanging out with the nurses and the OTs and the PTs and the doctors who treated you more like a human being than the world that was going to happen out there. And so, that was part of the process. So coming back to you. So what do you have to think about in leaving the nest? Well, I'm going to say it's similar to the process of coming home. Do you have an accessible house? Do you have caregivers? Caregiving is like this constant issue, no matter what year you're in. If it's year 1 or year 35, like myself, it's still an everyday issue. Are you medically sound? Are you able to go somewhere? If you're planning to leave the home, you better be medically sound in most of the time, because incredibly hard to make sure you have everything you got. Now, do you drive? I used to drive. I don't drive anymore, but I used to drive. And that was a huge part of my acceptance to my disability. How active are you going to stay? Are you going to be exercising? Are you going to be playing quad rugby like I did a little for Philadelphia? Are you going to join any activities? So these are a lot of different categories that I hope the hospitals are starting to talk to you about. I have a few OTs out there that are sitting right now. That is listening in. I say, look, you have to prep these people spinal cord injury, on transitioning home. Because if you can get that part done, if you can get that part figured out, then your transitioning out of the nest becomes easier. So that is part of what we're going to talk about is, are you psychologically going to go through all these categories and figure it out? So I went home. I was scared shitless, excuse my language, but the world was so different. Friends were no longer there. I had all these medical aid needs. I had all these caregiving needs. And I just learned to drive, and that was great. Driving was one of the greatest things, that I can learn to do, and that it gave me so much independence. So those of you who don't drive yet, man, you got to learn how to drive, because it's a path towards a lot of different things. Um, so what makes a transition both home and out possible and positive? Well, you have to, and I said this in the first podcast, you have to accept your disability. You have to grieve over the loss of what you can't do, and you have to accept it. If you don't accept what you have, and I'm going to say, when I read my Facebook groups I'm in with spinal inquiry, sometimes I see people post things like, life is hell. This life sucks. I don't want to accept it. It's impossible. That's a tough one, because if you don't accept that, it just pervades everything. So the first thing you got to do is figure a way, say, look, this is what I have. This is my future with what I have. And I'm going to just work with what I have. So acceptance of loss is important. Acceptance of the current situation. Again, part of that. So I went home. I was already a year in my college degree, and then I went home, and I wanted to go back to college. I wanted to go back to the same school. In part of my psyche, I thought if I go back to the same school, everything would be okay. And the reality is that it didn't. I went back to a college that had never had a severe person with a disability on their campus ever. And, there were no elevators in most buildings. There were no automatic doors. So it's me sitting outside the door, waiting for someone to go in and out. If it's raining, man, I'm wet. So I would never go in between class times, because no one walks around in between. It's mostly, top of the hour, waiting, making sure that other students are on their way so that I can get in the building. Difficult when you have classes on the second floor. Well, you can take a freight elevator if they allow you to, which I had to with some of my labs, but many of my classes, I asked them to, bring him downstairs. Now, before I even did all this, and before I even went back to college, I said, look, maybe I should go to the community college in the summer first and try it out. What is it like to be a person with a disability who can't take notes like I used to? So part of it is trial and error. And, again, for you who want to transition out and live alone and live independently, you need to practice taking over responsibility of all your medications and what would happen if caregivers don't show up. These are things that you have. So me going to a community college, I remember it was sociology. I took sociology, and I wanted to know, can I sit in a class and listen? And so again, this is a quadriplegia perspective. Now, those of you who are incomplete, those of you who are paraplegic, individuals with paraplegia, you may not have to worry about note taking and things like that in trance and drawing, but still the concept of you being in a room, in a wheelchair where everyone looks at you, you have to get used to that. And if you never, again, being at home, being in a rehab was an incredible cocoon. You can go home and become another cocoon. Once you get out into the real world, man, there's no protection. Now you're facing the reality of everybody looking at you, staring at you, asking questions. I was just thinking about this morning is that maybe rehabs should have a part of the building that's incredibly nice, and like they are right now, like the ones that are famous that you go to, the Kesslers and the ones, Good Shepherd and McGee and Phil in Atlanta. There's ones there, and Colorado. Oh, and then there should be another part of the building where there are, normal people that will treat you like crap so that you get used to it. It's like they intentionally maybe should put you in a situation where you are constantly being bombarded by negativism. Would that be a weird part of the building? You know, it's like, hey, I'm going to assign you to be the other side of the building to treat people poorly. But that's what you have to get used to, right? Give me a chat about, tell me if you have ever been treated, poorly out there in the real world, right? So going to college, community college, helped me understand what I needed to do, what I needed to get back to. And so transitioning out, again, same things that I had to face in transitioning home: caregivers, healthcare needs, finances. How are you going to pay for all this? I saw on a post yesterday, it said something like, I only get $900 a month from the state. How am I expected to pay for all the things I need to survive? And especially when a lot of the people who get hurt are young. So it's not like you have a lot of times to build up your Social Security. So it's a struggle. One of my talks eventually, and being biased, I'm a professor. So, I'm about going back to school. I am about going back to school and getting a degree and getting to a point where you can be employed in a good job. So we'll talk about that in another month. But coming back, what makes it work? First thing you got to do is accept your disability. You gotta do that to go home. You got to do that to get out of the home. Okay. You need to figure out your caregiving. I'm going to say to you, I don't know what is the best way. What I do know is that interviewing people and interviewing people who really cares about you and they treat you, it's cliche, like a family instead of just another job. I've been very fortunate that every person that's ever worked for me have worked for me for years. I'm going to have to say that maybe because hopefully I treat them well. But those of you who had people who've been there for you for years, you know how important they are. And they do treat you more like family because they know how important their position is. So, yeah. So caregivers, medical needs, wow, that's a whole, between sores and kidney stones and arthritis and pain and automatic dysreflexia. There's a multiple of things that you have to learn to make sure you are taking care of yourself. Now, many of you are going to say, look, there's the professionals I'm around aren't really understanding what spinal cord injury is. And so it's really key. It's really key that you educate the professionals out there if they don't understand about you. There's a lot of literature that I know in the foundation here has on different medical issues. So I have this little card I get from the foundation about autonomic dysreflexia. And it has all the information on what to do, what happens if your blood pressure goes up, and what kind of medications to treat it. And every time I go into the hospital and I have to be put under for a procedure, I hand this over to the anesthesiologist and I say, look, this is autonomic dysreflexia. And they're like, and they always say, oh, yeah, I've learned about that. But then you just don't want to assume they actually understand what to do. And I still talk to them. I say, look, if my blood pressure goes over 150, this is what you treat. If it goes over 180, this is how you treat. If it goes over 220 over one, systolic, this is what kind of medication. And they'll sit down and hopefully they're nice enough doctor that they'll listen to what you're saying. But that is the level of aggressive assertiveness you have to do. So those of you who saying, man, I don't know if I can do that. I don't know if I can say that. Well, you're going to have to learn it. It's a skill. You have to assert your needs at times with healthcare professionals, because many of you email me and say, look, there's people around me don't get it. The professionals around me don't get it. So if they don't get it, you need to get it. You need to be an advocate of yourself. So health needs, finances. Again, we're going to talk about finances. Now, I was in school for way too many years, 12 years, 2 masters, a doctorate. I was in school till I was 30. So I was pretty poor. I call college kids and grad students the privileged poor. We have access to a lot of things, but we don't have any money. So I got used to being poor. But once you get your degree in the right places, then you can support yourself better than relying on the government, because hopefully you'll make a little bit more. And that is critical in having some quality of life, because having good quality of life is having good memories and good people around you and good health. Transportation. Now we're in a country where public transportation is incredibly hard to do. I remember taking a bus one time, and it was pouring. I was sitting there waiting, and the bus pulls up and a guy opens the door, and instead of letting me on, he was, in this pouring rain, he was just worried about if I was getting on the right bus. And all I want to do is get on the bus to get out of the rain. So I'll tell you, that was the last time I took the bus, because I was just like, man, I don't want to be stuck in the rain like I just did previously. So transportation. So those are, again, being active. Now, I'm aware that there are some alternative locations of living where there are 24/7 medical care. Not many. There's a few out there in the country. I don't know many. If you know any, please put down in the chat. But man, that would be incredible, because to not have to worry about caregiving. I have a friend that lives in a nursing home, but he comes and goes as he pleases in a nursing home. He drives, he visits his family. And I said to him one time, I said, look, why don't you move out and live somewhere else instead of the nursing home? He said, I don't have to worry about my, cares. There's always someone, there that, and when I was living at home and I was living away from, we always struggle. And I think the critical factor was his family was taking care of him at the time, the mother and his sister. And he had such enormous guilt of having his family taking care of him. That was hard for him. And after a heated battle, a conversation that probably got out of hand, I think what he said was, the sister said, your life pretty much dictates my life. And she was resentful of that anymore. And I can see that happening as well, because a lot of my family members, and even now, has to give up a lot of their life to take care of me. And I do feel guilty. And I do feel frustrated and sad about it at times. So I try to make up by being productive. I try to make it up by being happy in others, but I would lie to you if it wasn't hard on my own family. So let me know in your chat if that has happened to you in your life, that it's just so much guilt and enormous factor in that. So then, for this individual who lives in a nursing home, he decided to go into the nursing home, live from the nursing home, but yet he has options to leave it as well. During this pandemic, it was really bad. They weren't allowed to leave the building for almost a year, and at times not even allowed to leave their rooms. That's how bad this pandemic has restricted his life. But in general, that was the main factor why he went to a long-term living facility. So yeah, going home is not easy. And then going away can be better. You get rid of the guilt of having family members, and you live on people who maybe get paid to help you. But you have to also realize when you have caregivers like that, they're probably less consistent in life for you, especially if you're living in the snow belt where it's difficult to. One of the things I've always did when I hire caregivers is I try not to hire anybody that's farther than 15 minutes away driving. If you get into 20 and 25 minutes, now you're putting a lot of distance between you and your person. And if it snows that day, you're in trouble because they may not get in. Now, if you're like me, who has to get up early enough so I can get to work and be functional, that means they have to get there early enough to get you going. I mean, my routines were 3 hours in the morning. So you think of it, if you have to make a 9 o'clock meeting, you're getting up 5 in the morning at times. I have a friend who works in Philly, who's a lawyer, who he used to get up at 4 in the morning to make sure he gets done and get going and get down there by 7, or I assume he got started around 8 o'clock. But again, it's sacrificing your time. So balancing your life, get ready for limited support when you move out. You know, it's relying on the people that are around you, and making sure that you have enough backups. You know, from electric chairs, there's backups. You have to have 2 chairs. Caregivers, if they're willing to back each other up. If you have strong social relationship like family and friends, then your life probably would be better. Now you're saying, well, how do I get that? Well, if you don't have that, being a psychologist, and if you go to a psychologist, one of the things I would teach you would be to learn how to develop better relationships. You know, there's ways to communicate with people. There's ways to seek different people that have the type of personality that you are interested in. Okay. So what happens? What happens? Now, in part of my talk, I said, look, being at home will generate anxiety. Having the whole situation, the underlying theme of being at home or being away is anxiety, and possibly, you know, if the trauma of your injury is so severe, then your lack of control could be so high that you may experience what we call post-traumatic stress disorder. Approximately almost a quarter of people with spinal cord injury who have a severe injury have post-traumatic stress disorder. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So again, to reiterate, before I talk about PTSD, so that going home, you have to have all your ducks in a row: medications, caregivers, health needs, finances, transportation. These are things you got to figure out before you go home. Once you go home, you're going to have to figure that out to make sure you can leave home, because you're not going to have mom. You're not going to have your family. Okay. When I went back to college after my summer of going to community college, and then I went back to my college full time, the first 2 weeks, I was very lucky in the sense that my mom actually came with me to college for the first 2 weeks just to make sure I survived. And, you know, 30 years ago, if I would have told you that story, I would have been embarrassed to say that my mom went to college with me. Now I'm proud of it. I'm proud to say that I had such a dedicated mother. And I'm going to say many of you may have one of those as well. Have a dedicated family member that's so supportive that they'd be willing to do anything for you. So mine went to college with me for 2 weeks, and I was really glad that happened, because going back to college for the first time as a person with disability was incredibly scary and frustrating as well. So I'm glad that she came along, make sure that, and I had 5 individuals getting me up. Had 2 individuals at night to help me go to bed. Obviously, they rotated. I had a great minister named Scott Landis, who was the minister of the college. He was my point person. He was my go-to person. And this is the part where you have to think about when you go away. Can you have that point person that's willing to be there if everyone else doesn't show up? So that was my point person, the Reverend Scott Landis. He's out there in California now. Hey, Scott, if you're listening sometime. So let's talk a little bit about PTSD, because I wanted you to understand some of the symptoms that comes with spinal cord injury. So let me show you. I have a little flyer on some of the criteria on PTSD. If Kaylee, can you share that flyer for me with the adult? Want to make sure I'm going in the right time. I want to be able to answer some questions. So post-traumatic stress disorder. Okay, a lot of criteria. You have to have all of these in order to. So you have to have a stressor. Witness to a trauma. You having a spinal cord injury. Indirect exposure. You don't have to actually have the trauma. Like a first responder for this pandemic, all those nurses in the ER and the doctors, they could have PTSD because they're exposed to this constantly for such a long time. So having a stressor, criterion A, okay, down. Criterion B, it becomes intrusive, okay, nightmares, flashback. Now, I don't believe I have PTSD, but when I get really anxious, I have these really bad dreams. And so they become intrusive. Unwanted, upsetting memories. Keep going down. Criterion C. Okay. You start avoiding things. You don't go to certain places. You start avoiding certain feelings. You try to numb yourself. Maybe you start drinking. Maybe you start taking a lot of medications to not hide your thoughts. Okay. Next. I have a young girl that I'm treating right now that smokes a lot of marijuana and does coke. That's how she numbs herself from doing the PTSD experience. Alteration of cognitions. Okay, you start to think negatively. You start not being interested in people. You avoid people. You isolate yourself. Okay, let's keep going down. You become very jumpy, hypervigilant, a startle response. Okay, difficulty concentrating. You can't read, you can't focus, and you can't sleep. Scroll down. Has to last a month. Okay, so it can't just be something that's happened yesterday and then you have it and then goes away. It has to be with you for at least a month. Okay, and last, keep going. And it impacts your life socially, work, some aspect of your physical life. And keep going. And you can't be due to a medication. So it has to be due to that stressor and not due to something that you are taking like drugs or medications. So that's the adult symptoms of PTSD. So if you're experiencing that when you go home, which 24% of us spinal cord injury will, and if you're experiencing that when you go away, it's when you go out and leave the home, you're more likely to experience that at times because the anxiety itself of leaving home and your nest may exacerbate that. Okay, and I'm going to just briefly show you the PTSD for children of 6 years and under. It's slightly different. I'm not going to go in detail too much of it, but I just want to put it up for you there. So children could have PTSD as well, and under 6. We'll scroll down. So if they are either abused, sexual abuse, rape, natural disasters, accidents, loss of a caregiver. So these are all potential causes of PTSD in young children, 6 or under. Next. Scroll down. So they're under 6 and could be either real or threatening. You know, it could be a threatening death, serious injury, violence. They have learned a traumatic event. They don't have to be directly exposed if they were just taught or by a caregiver. Scroll down. Keep going, keep going. It's recurring, intrusive, and so one of these thoughts, it's long lasting. Let's see, strong physical responses like sweats, heart rate. Okay, scroll down. So if you're experiencing any of these things, or if you're any of your children experiencing some of these things, if they may be experiencing PTSD, they tend to avoid activities. They are negative emotional. They fear, shame, sadness, social withdrawal. Keep going. Keep going. They're irritable, difficulty sleeping, concentrating, hypervigilance. Yeah, a lot of these symptoms appear to be overlapping with adults, but again, for children, there are some subtle differences. Okay, so coming back to you, why do I talk about PTSD? I think many of us get overlooked. Those who are Hispanic, minorities, African Americans, compared to whites, have higher rates of PTSD. Individuals with low socioeconomic status has a higher rate of PTSD. Let's see, if you have depression, you're probably more likely to. So they say that the event, the spinal cord injury, causes the trauma, which is the PTSD, which leads to depression. So PTSD is like the middle part. So those professionals out there, you not only should you be assessing people if they have depression or not, you should be assessing the fact that do they have PTSD as well. Okay. All right. Let's see. I want to make sure I address some of the pre-registration questions that's available that was sent in before the registration process. So, okay, let me see. I am going to pick one of these out of here. So my life is rampant with depression and anxiety, and I'm struggling to make everyone happy. Okay, this is Amber, and Amber from PA. She says, my life is run by depression, anxiety, and I'm struggling to make everyone happy. Well, first of all, I'm going to say to you, if you're in therapy with me, I would say you can't make others happy. You have to do the things to make yourself happy. You have to do the things that be productive in your life. If you do that, then others usually around you are happier. But if you could do almost everything right, and people still will not be happy around you. So they're out of your control. So control what you can control. Make yourself happy. Do the things that make yourself productive in this world. And then hopefully people around you will be happier. let's see. Okay, so Jan mentions here, it says the challenges of including low-income housing, unfair managers, and income inequality. Yeah, that is a huge societal question for me, and I really don't have a good answer from a social political answer. My thoughts on is please find a way to go back to school. People with spinal cord injury, funny, there's many of us actually get degrees. In comparison to general population, most of us actually have, there's a greater percentage of college degrees with people with spinal cord injury than not with spinal cord injury. So there's definitely a push towards getting your degree, having an employment. If you can get into computers, I would tell you that is the direction to go. Computer science, being able, because that's the future, those are where the jobs, you can do that from home, it's flexible. So anything that can work with computers is my recommendation. I think being a psychologist just takes way too long for the amount of money you make. So go be a computer scientist, you'll make a lot more money in less time. Okay. Philip has a tough question. Phil from Georgia says, how do you convince a significant other that you are worth it? I'm gonna say that you're trying to ask, even with my disability, I'm a worthful person to be around. And that is back to, you have to be, 1, a positive, 2, productive, 3, financially stable. Those are things are good to have as your characteristics to attract someone. No one wants to be around a Debbie Downer. No one wants to be around someone who is pessimistic. So you have to be productive, engaging. Do you sometimes have to fake that you're not so upset about your disability? Yeah, I think so. Yeah, sometimes you have to fake it. But in general, you have to feel like you accepted your disability. And if you can't do that, now I'm biased, you have to go to a counselor. Help someone help you figure that out. Okay, so, okay, let's see. I'm saying this name wrong. Charisse from California says, how do you explain to some people who do not have chronic illness that there are some days when our bodies feel fatigued, not in a normal kind of way, and not all in our heads? Whew, yeah, I mean, if you have spinal cord injury, some days, sometimes your body just hurts. It just physically hurt. And I'm going to say others who are able-bodied, who are not spinal cord injury, they do have a harder time understanding. They have a hard time seeing the world from your perspective. Now, if they live around you enough, they start to get a little better view of. So if it's someone, your close family member, they're getting it. Trust me, they're getting it a little bit more than you think. If it's someone's outside that doesn't know you at all, then you need to be their friends, because once they are your friends and they start to get invested in your life, then they will start to understand some of the things you struggle with. And if you have fatigue, you need to do 2 things. 1, communicate to others that you are not having a good day. But 2, you need to pace yourself. Pacing means, okay, this is how much energy I have in a day. This is what I can do. I'm going to do those things, do it in the morning when I have most energy, take naps, wake up, then go do it again. So I have a client right now that has been ill most of her life, and She struggles because she feels guilty. She can't do the things that she says she should be doing as a housewife. She can't take care of the house. Husband works all day, comes home, nothing's done. He gets resentful because she can't do anything. She feels frustrated. She feels angry. And so we're working on communication. We're working on understanding each other's needs and see if there's a way to work through these issues together. So, okay. Wow, my mouth is getting dry from talking so long. Haley, do you have anything that came up that I can address live questions?
So we actually received a few questions in the chat box. The first one is, how do you deal with feeling like you are not where you should be in life?
Oh, I got sunshine coming. Ooh, how do you deal with not where you want to be?
Yep. How do you deal with, oh, I'm sorry. It's how do you deal with feeling like you're not where you should be in life?
I guess one of the big parts is just getting clarity of where do you want to be. Again, that's maybe a biased counselor, psychologist, or where do you want to be? What is the gap with where you currently are and where do you want to get to? And psychologists say there's two ways to do it. You're going to have to either get more skills so that you can get to where you want to be, or you can decrease your expectations, meaning you're going to have to change your goal so that it's closer to what your skills can attain. I'm going to give you an example. As a professor, we have students who want to get good grades. And they come in and say, I want a 4.0. And I say to them, okay, to get a 4.0, where are you currently? And if they say, oh, I have a 2.5, I'm like, well, you need to get more skills to learn how to study to get closer to 4.0. That would decrease stress if you have the skill. For others who are not willing to have the skills or learn the skills or have the motivation, I say to them, look, you're 2.5, you're going to need to lower your standards a little bit, maybe to 3, so that you can reach that goal with some changes. And with a theory out there that says, by just changing your expectations, it helps reduce general stress. Okay. I hope that answered.
The next question I received is, having a family member help me with my bowel program or hygiene is embarrassing and difficult. How do I get over that?
Yeah. God, bowel and bladder, man. Bowels and bladders control everything in our lives. Yeah, it doesn't matter what injury level you are. If you have a bowel and bladder issue that you cannot do it on your own, it is just embarrassing. I'm having this light coming through the window here. So then, so you trust me, if it's a family member, they're probably not as upset as you are. You're probably already embarrassed enough with it. So talk to them, express that say to them, this is embarrassing. I know this is hard on you as well. And I would get, if anyone who loves you, they're going to say, I know it's odd, it's uncomfortable, but this is life for us, and we just got to do what we got to do to get through. So just communicate your concerns. So.
The next question is, should depression be treated with medicine, psychotherapy, or both?
Well, that's a great question. Research shows that the combination of therapy and medication will give you the fastest result. I'm biased. If you take just medication, you never get to the root of why it's happening. And the medication eventually will habituate and it doesn't work. I have people who have been on antidepressants for 20 years and they're not working anymore, to be honest, but you're just so used to taking it. So and doctors will say, how are you doing? And if you say, yes, I'm okay, they're not going to change your meds. And in theory, after a few years, the medication doesn't work anymore. But if you're in therapy, which is great, you'll learn, but it just takes longer with therapy. So I like the combination of both. You get on medication for at least 3 to 6 months, you do intensive therapy, and then once you feel better, you start weaning off the medication. Okay.
The next question is, how can you determine if an illness is causing depression or if depression is causing the illness?
Well, so what is first, the chicken or the egg, right? So with spinal cord injury, the incident of the injury itself will lead you to depression. Depression for the general population is about 10%. The depression for spinal cord injury, I've seen studies between 30 to 50%. It's almost, so when it's that high, plus, as you know, spinal cord injury is a traumatic injury. It's a life-altering. Those of you who have spinal cord injury have always, I hear people call it the second birthday. You know exactly what time and when it happened to call it a second birthday. And so it's that specific. All of us have that second birthday. And so I would say that leads to depression. Okay. Now, are you more susceptible to depression if you have certain personalities? Even before, and some people would ask me, how well is this person going to accept their disability and move on? And usually I always say, well, what was their personality like before their injury? Were they really optimistic, outgoing, overachiever? Because if you're like that, then the injury probably won't impact you as much and you're still going to be an achiever and outstanding. But if you're already struggling with life and then you have the injury, well, now it's going to get worse, most likely. So, okay. All right, great. Thank you, Kaylee, for those questions. And I want to leave with a thought that life is short, and throughout this whole process, I want to say to you that please take care of yourself and really respect and not take it for granted the people around you, the social support of the people around you. Don't sweat the small stuff. Really try to focus on the bigger picture. And so the bigger picture, and really love the people around you. Okay. I want to thank you again for coming on to Living Well with Dr. John. Please let all your other friends know about our podcast. We want to reach as many individuals with spinal cord injuries and professionals out there who work with individuals like me. Thank you. Have a good day.